welcome back to Wrist Check Podcast, episode 13.
Yeah.
1-3. It's a lucky number in some circles, right? We got another special guest. This is going to be a season of guests, I guess you can say, with fellow watch collectors and friends. But I think that's great. It makes it more exciting. We actually, it gives us an opportunity to share more stories and share some actual pieces. So I'm excited to have you join us today.
Thanks for having me.
Wrist check. Dana, you want to start us off?
Yes.
What are you wearing?
I am wearing a vintage Rolex Oyster Perpetual. Really special story actually behind this watch. Not only did it start my love for all things watches and vintage pieces, but this actually belonged to my grandfather. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, it's 1969, I believe, somewhere around there. But story goes, he wore this watch every day pretty much since he got it. He, to what my mother told me, used to work as like the second mate, I don't know, like a second mate on a ship. Not the captain, but captain's like right-hand man, whatever that title's called. But he bought this watch and just wore it every day. He passed 3 years before I was born.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. So I never got to meet him, but heard great things about him. And for my college graduation some years ago, my mom was like, "Do you want anything?" And I said, "No, it's okay. Like, come to New York. We'll just celebrate. It'll be a good time. You know, nothing crazy." And she's like, "You know what? Actually, I think I have something for you." So I was like, "Okay, I don't really know what that means, but all right." And so she comes back and she's like, "Hey, like, would you like this watch?" And I kind of freaked out. I was like, "Did you go out and buy this? Like, I don't know what's going on."
Mom
She's
bought
like,
you a Rolex?
I know, right? I was going to be like, all right, cool. But then she actually told me, she was like, "Yeah, this hasn't been worn in like 25 years. It belonged to your grandfather." And that kind of, you know, that whole story spun off. And I was like, "Yeah, hell yeah,
It's
I'll take
nice.
that."
It's got like
yeah.
It's got like a blue dial.
Yes. So it looks gray now. It used to be blue. It's a mosaic dial. So I think it's like, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it might be like it's made from like silk. And so it was blue originally. And through the years, you know, he wore it every day, exposed to the sun in Hong Kong. So, you know, it just patinaed in all the right ways.
I mean, he wore it on the boat. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Humidity and water definitely do it.
Yeah, I think it's funny too, because like on the pre-owned sort of like vintage market, I'm actually starting to see a lot of like the mosaic dials come back.
Yeah.
There was a blue one that I saw recently. I'm curious if that's like the same year model.
It's the same blue. It's just like, I mean, the paint has flaked off so much that you can't even
It's nice
see
though.
it.
It's got like a really good color to it. It's almost kind of like a little more slate.
Yeah.
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 That's
and
pretty tight.
a gray strap just to bring it out a little more.
The strap is like snakeskin?
Yeah, it's like made from like a water snake skin. And so I have to get a strap for most of my watches custom made.
I feel like we're going to talk about straps a lot this episode.
Yeah. We're going to talk about straps a lot.
What are you working with, Rashawn? What do you got for us today?
Oh, man. So this piece is very special. And I shared a little bit of the sentiment in our previous episode. This here is a Wenger, which is a sub-brand to Victorinox.
Okay.
So it's a Swiss Army Wenger watch. What makes this watch so special, although it's like $25, I was sharing before that, like, I was at an event with Mr. Lauren. So, of course, you know, we have a close relationship with Mr. Ralph Lauren and the whole Lauren family. But I was at an event and Mr. Jerry Lauren actually pointed out my watch.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, "What is that?" In that like old raspy voice. He was like,
real quick, for people who don't know, Jerry is Ralph's older brother.
He's Ralph's older brother. So he pointed this watch out and he's like, "What is that?" And I go, "It's a simple Wenger." He's like, "Man, that's great." And we go ahead from talking about this simple $25 watch. We went on to talking about just stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And we had that conversation just about stuff.
Did he talk
just
about
like
his American
collecting
folk art collection?
Yes,
and
exactly.
weather vanes.
Just like talking about collecting stuff. And of course, like, you know, me holding a conversation with someone that arguably is a part of the best American outfitter ever was just like so powerful, impactful that just a simple timepiece like brought us together. The funniest conversation we had, he goes, yeah, so you know, I got Ralph and his wife, and you know, I got my wife when she was, you know, when she was around, presidential Rolexes. And he goes,
Nice.
he goes, you know what Ralph gave me?
A Bentley.
A Bentley. He goes, and Ralph gave me a Bentley. And I'm like, man, like it's like apples to oranges, but this conversation all stemmed from
That's
a
a really
$25
good Jerry
watch.
Lauren impression, by the way, too.
And I think when thank you.
Yeah.
When Kelly had asked us before, like if there was, you know, a watch that, you know, we would wear for, you know, the rest of our lives, this one would be it out of all the watches that I own, because it put me in a place where I could connect to anyone, you know, at any level or any social status. You know, a man that's literally a billionaire decided to ask me about my $25 watch.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
It's a pretty watch. It's got like it's a cream dial.
Cream dial. It does have a Spanish date wheel,
Nice.
which is cool. Right now I have it on the English side, but Spanish date wheel, much larger than I usually wear. But also another special callback. Ben actually gave me the the strap
Yacked it
idea.
out.
Love it.
No, I bend it up.
He bent it out. He bent it out.
We need a whole different term for this.
So Ben bent it out, gave me the strap idea.
It looks good.
Yeah.
It's super toolish.
Yeah.
And then with the green suede strap,
It gives it that military.
it still keeps the military aesthetic, but it also kind of elevates it a little bit.
It looks like uniform,
Yeah,
standard issue.
absolutely. No, it's great. So, you know, I'm very appreciative of this watch and where it's been and my experiences with it.
That's great, man.
Love that.
I'm wearing a watch I've worn on the show before. This is a vintage Tudor Oyster Date. That was a gift from my wife for Christmas.
Shout out Perry's wife.
2 years ago.
We
Yeah.
won that episode.
I mean,
We can't
Infamous
miss it.
shout out.
Yeah, at least if it doesn't happen in an episode, is it really an episode?
No.
now? But I've been wearing this one a lot more recently. After consulting Ben, he too bend out my wristwatch and advised me on this recent strap purchase. It's like a brown lizard strap, and it's nice. I spent the last couple of days just staring at it more. What I love about it is how the contrast in color separates all the other colors on the watch, like the case from the dial, from the indices. It kind of makes everything pop out a little bit more. And so it feels nice. So I've been wearing this more. I usually, if I do wear it, it's like maybe a couple of times a month. I literally have been wearing this like the last 4 days. Having a hard time taking it off, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So thank you for that. What do you got for us
I
today? What's
busted
on
out
your
the
wrist?
Baltic again.
Okay.
The MR01.
The micro rotor.
Yes, I wore it for a reason. And that's because I finally got my hands on the salmon dial.
Respect. Congratulations.
I just won't get it till September though.
Okay.
And I wanted to wear it because Dana was coming and she got her hands on one too.
I did.
Except she's getting hers way before mine. For
Which-
whatever
Which
reason.
color dial are you getting?
the salmon.
Also the
because
salmon dial.
It's classic.
It is really nice.
And ironically, for the first time, I had a strap for a watch, but didn't have a watch for the strap.
Ooh.
So that kind of pushed me to get it. But no, I'm a fan of dressier pieces, typically, and it's just, I mean, it's just so clean.
Yeah.
And yeah, they emailed me. Well, granted, I was like super obsessive about it and like ordered it within 2 minutes of it going live. And so they emailed me back and was like, your delivery will be coming in July. And I was like, oh, amazing.
Nice.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Cool.
Yeah,
So,
their
yeah.
stuff sells out pretty quickly too, so I totally
Yeah.
get the urgency. It's like Baltic is kind of on fire right now.
Yeah. Well,
They
the
can
first-
almost do no wrong.
Yeah, the first time they released the MR1, I mean, it sold out in like, what, 2 hours?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like,
I was
can't
surprised
miss
they
out.
actually brought it back.
They did a pre-order for 10 days,
Yeah.
which was crazy.
They've never done anything like
Because
that.
I was contemplating getting the salmon one. They're like, after coming out again and getting the email to pre-order, I was like, whatever. But then on like after the 10 days, I think it was the 20th to the 30th. On the 30th, I was like, I might as well do it. I've been thinking about it.
Yeah.
And they brought it back out on a bracelet.
Oh,
They had the
I
bracelet
saw the
option.
bracelet option.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
It's
But
kind
that's
of
like their standard bracelet. It's like a beads of rice bracelet that they do.
Crazy. But
Yeah.
when I get that watch, I'm gonna do something crazy with the strap.
I can't wait to see it.
Oh, I mean, it's a salmon colored dial.
Salmon
Well,
on
he
salmon.
said what he was gonna do with it before.
It's gonna match the jacket.
Salmon on salmon.
Salmon skin, salmon colored strap.
It's a lot of fish.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fish.
Oh man. Moving on.
Shout out to our lunch at Lure.
Yeah, we had a good
We had
lunch.
a lot of fish.
bar.
We did. Yeah. Got fish on the brain. We hung out with Ramil this afternoon.
Shout out to Ramil.
Came all the way from California.
He came all the way from California to see us, and it was awesome. So you got quite a few pieces for us today, and we'll go through each of them. The story you shared about the piece on your wrist, I think is awesome, and that's kind of the thing that like we kind of like to highlight the most, right? Is like the stories, especially when we do this like collector's edition. The stories behind these pieces, because oftentimes like with watch collecting, I feel like with a lot of people, when we talk about this a lot of people feel like it's kind of like a task that they have to undertake.
Yeah.
And they have to check off boxes, and they have to run through like this predetermined like course. But one of the magical things that happens with watches is someone gets one, they wear it, they pass it down. And the fact that like this ancestor of yours, this elder in your family whom you've never met, through a shared hobby that you both have in your separate lives, you are reconnected with him.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I think that's really awesome.
Yeah.
So if we can go back to your childhood, I see a Flik flag.
Yes.
So this is interesting because I just bought one for my daughter for Christmas, and I wasn't aware that Flik has been around. I know that they're owned by Swatch, but I didn't know that they were making these as long as they have.
Yes. I believe they started making them in the late 80s. I think 87 might be the year, but don't quote me on that. This one is from 97,
Oh, wow.
which is actually very close to my birth year. Story behind that one is that Flak is the exact Flik I had growing up as a kid. So
Wow.
when I was, like as quick as I could run, my parents, parents had pretty good taste, I'll say that. They gifted me this watch because, they thought it was really cute. I reacted really well to the fish. I think I was like obsessed with aquatic things at
Yeah.
that age. I don't remember, but
They're
that's
little
my
Steve
guess.
Sisu.
Yep. And I don't unfortunately think I still have the one from when I was a kid, but when I found it online, I was like, oh man, I gotta have this. Like it just like brought back like
Oh, that's
childhood
awesome. So it's kind of
memories.
like a reclaimed piece. You're like rekindling your childhood.
Yeah, so this came from a Swatch collector in Europe. So it's in fantastic condition.
It's kind of wild to me that it doesn't surprise me that you have these collectors all over the place, but it's like the fact that like you found like a Swatch collector
Yeah.
like in another country.
Yeah.
And you guys are like able to like find this piece that you had when you were a kid.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild.
Is that a repro? Or is that like a
No,
90?
that
that's
is,
a
This is the
that
original.
That's
97.
legit.
Yeah, it's the
Wow.
original.
But the reason why I asked because it's mint.
Yes.
It is like
Yes.
untouched.
Yep, that's
Wow.
correct. Definitely mine from when I was a kid does not look like that in
Yeah.
any way, shape, or form because I wore that thing.
Yeah, it's in pretty good
everywhere.
condition.
So I want to ask because we had Kelly on the show previously, and she spoke about how she had a Swatch that was that retail for $30, but maybe if you see it on the internet now, it's probably like 2, 3, 10 times more than it is. Do you mind sharing how much you paid for this?
No, not at all. I paid, I think, $150 around there.
Wow.
Which honestly was kind of shocking. So I was very happy to find that.
Wow.
But the fact that it came from another collector also kind of meant a lot to me because I know that this has been well taken care of.
Yeah, and if
appreciated.
you're collecting swatches, let's be honest, you're pretty passionate about it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Right.
Exactly.
The cool thing about this too is that just like in messing around with it, I realized that the bezel turns. This is
Yeah.
like a
got a
children's
dive
dive
watch.
watch.
It's a children's, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Take it to the kiddie pool with a floaty.
That's all I did. I was just like wherever I was, I just would play with the bezel all the time, having no idea what the bezel did
Yeah.
at the time. But you know,
It's like the first fidget spinner.
So is
The
this
hands in this
piece
are
what
funky.
kind of like you, I know your parents got it for you. Is this what sparked your appreciation for watches? Where did that start exactly, if not?
I think, you know, I've always been interested in watches. I didn't know too much about it, so it was kind of like, oh, you knew the big brands, as everyone does. You know Rolex, you know Patek. And to me, I always just saw them as like mechanical marvels, right? Like you have a watch that's made with all of these individual, like hundreds of individual parts, and it works for the automatic movements, you know, and the mechanical movements, they work without any electricity, which is like mind-boggling to me. I still don't understand. Which is, it's just really cool, and I've always saw them as, you know, in a sense, a piece of art. And so I've always appreciated them. It really wasn't until I got my grandfather's watch that I really started going down a rabbit hole, because I was just trying to learn more about, you know, this piece. I just wanted to know, you know, what year it came from, like when was it made, why was it made, kind of understanding the history that surrounded kind of, you know, the piece at the time, because all of, especially vintage pieces, you know, they were made within a certain historical context, right? And it's kind of interesting to piece all of that together. You know, that just really, when I found that, it just brought back such happy childhood.
Did you show
memories
this
for
to your
me.
parents?
No, I did not. Mostly because I asked my mom if she can still track down the one I had as a kid. Because, I mean, look, as beautiful and as mint condition as that is, I would still love the one from.
Sure, so you don't want to let her know you have a replacement already.
Yeah,
I got
and
it.
she ain't
also
gonna look
because then
for
she'll
it.
be like, "Oh, I
So
don't
you
need
already
that."
have
Or-
it. It's all
good.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Like, oh
no.
yeah, we don't have to go digging for this.
That's hilarious. Moving along, what's the I guess what's the next like oldest piece that you have here for us?
In terms of like year.
Just
in
like
terms
what
of-
comes after this? If we had to create
Acquisition.
a timeline.
Yeah, acquisition, I guess.
I'm sure you had watches in between, but
Yeah. Oh, I'll go over this one then. So this is.
I just want to, before we continue,
Yeah.
I want to be clear. We went from the Flik Flak to a root beer Rolex. So this is a big jump real quick.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it went 0 to 100.
So the reason why I jumped to this was, you know, had my childhood watch, which was the first watch that I got to wear myself, and a watch for myself. And then, you know, I got my grandfather's watch when I graduated college, and that, you know, I still wear this every day. And that kind of reignited my passion for watches, and then specifically for vintage watches. So on that note, this was the first watch I bought for myself.
Nice.
And it's actually kind of how I met Ben and then subsequently Rashawn, because I bought it at, you know, in Soho. But you know, I feel like this has been said multiple times, not just by people on the show, but just anyone in general. You know, Rolex is kind of associated with, you know, some big momentous life moment, you know, whether that's a new job or, you know, a life change. And for me, you know, I had been working for a couple of years, was in a good place financially, and I was about to kind of pivot into a new role, which there's more on that actually. It's kind of funny, but I was a year premature on that. But you know, I saw this in the store from Analog Shift, and I was like, I mean, this is amazing. Like it just is in superb condition. It has patina in all the right ways. Like the bezel's really what caught my eye.
Yeah.
Because you really rarely get to see a bezel that's, you know, patinaed so evenly.
Yes.
And in such a very nice way. I smile every time I look at it, actually.
That's what, yeah.
Doing it now.
Yeah.
But you know, this watch I wear, I really wanted a GMT specifically because at the time I was traveling a lot. My parents live in Shanghai. I'm originally from LA, so I always liked being able to keep track of all these different time zones. which is funny because I don't use it now. But, I also, you have the Pepsis, you have, moving into like modern Rolex, you have the Batman. But I just felt like none of that was for me. It seemed, they are very classic watches, especially the Pepsi and the vintage Pepsi. But I don't know, I'm kind of a person that needs to put a twist on things.
I feel you. I mean, I personally, I love the root beer. And you have the nipple dial. This is, to me, it's like, I think one of the best GMT designs that Rolex has done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what's most interesting about it is, like you said, this isn't, even though like they are really popular, you don't really see them a lot on people's wrists in the wild. It's a watch that most people who own it don't actually wear it that often.
Yep.
But it is really nice when it is on someone's wrist.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because this is like if I can.
Yeah,
what is this?
course.
This is like a 40?
Yes, 39, 40, somewhere in between.
It's like right there. Is it? Do you typically go for like bigger sizes?
It depends. My sweet spot personally would probably be like a 34 to 36. I mean, I have like the thinnest wrist in the world. A 34 looks gigantic on me, but at the same time, one of the reasons why I gravitated towards vintage pieces was because even though that's like a 39-40,
it's got a slimmer profile.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it just works.
That's kind of what I love about vintage Rolexes, aside from the fact that they have a lot of character. I feel like the cases are perfect.
Yep.
Like
the proportions are better on vintage Rolex.
100%.
For sure.
They wear better, and it's interesting too because it seems like there's a trend of ladies wearing larger watches, and I think it works.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's like this myth or these myths and these rules that people have about the size watches that they wear, and you're sitting with three guys that happen to we have like a range. Like Rashawn will go as low as like a 34. I've got a watch that's a 43.
Yeah.
And I have small wrists.
Yeah.
Like right now, this is like a 36. So I think it's cool when you see like a diversity in size that people have in their collection.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely will say I gravitate towards the larger sizes, when I want to make a statement.
Sure.
Like, it is my if I'm dressing very, not plainly, but everything else is a little more subtle, and then I kind of want some statement piece, that'll typically be it. But on the note of case sizes and just what works for men and women, one of the most frustrating things honestly for me when I first started really watch shopping and visiting retailers around the city was I think because as a woman you walk in and people are just like,
everyone's showing you the smaller watches.
it's not even that, and it's just like, hey, like here are these like diamond covered pieces, and I'm like
yeah
I'm just kind of like, I appreciate that, but I don't know what about me currently in my because I usually wear like leggings and a sweater. I don't
That's
know
why
what
you need a
about
diamond
me.
watch.
yeah
I'm like, what about me says that I wear diamonds frequently? So that was kind of my thing, and I felt like that was very common because people, kind of make that assumption that you want something smaller if you're a woman, and then for even on the flip side for guys, you walk in and people just assume you want a sports model, you want a sports model, you want this big watch.
Exactly. And it's funny too because what I admire so much about your collection and so much of what we covered so far is the fact that you said I know what I like. I know what I like. I know what gravitates to me. I know what speaks to me. And like you said, the Batman is cool. This is cool. That's cool. But that doesn't speak to me. The hype doesn't speak to me. What everybody's wearing on their wrist doesn't speak to me. And I think that's something that we kind of need to go back into the essence of watch collecting. And that's what we continue to push on this show is be yourself.
Definitely.
You don't have to go ahead and follow behind what your friends buy or what your boy says is cool or so on and so forth. It's it's actually okay. I like that Flik Flak.
Yeah, the Flik Flak is dope.
I wear it all all the time.
You know what I mean? Like, I like that GMT that's
Yeah.
from, like, you know, the 70s.
That's the cool
You know,
thing
you know
about
what's
like.
crazy? You
Go
said
ahead.
GMT from the 70s, and for some reason, I thought Dana bought that watch because it was her birth year.
Yeah, I was
And
like,
it's from,
Ben,
like,
how old do you
78.
think I am?
I was like, wait. I was like, that's not from your birth year. I thought that's why you wanted it.
No, but this
A
is,
little
like,
offended,
beautiful.
Ben.
This is beautiful.
But I also feel like to get a root beer, you kind of have to love it.
Yes.
Because it is a statement piece. It's very specific. And in a lot of ways, it's similar to like why I was obsessed with like the bronze Tudor that I had,
Yep.
right? And I think in a lot of people's heads, it's like, oh, it's two-tone. It's got a brown dial. I can't wear this all the time. Does it go to that? You can wear that watch with almost anything.
It's uniform.
It is
Like Ben has said before.
You're
It's
supposed to put them on and forget about it.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I've worn this thing from when I'm in sweatpants all the way to when
Yeah.
I'm dressed up for an event.
Well, a gold watch, period. You
Yeah.
wear gold, like, no one can tell you anything if you wear a gold watch. No
They
matter
shouldn't be
where
able
you
to,
go.
right?
Like, you wear a gold watch to the grocery store. You wear a gold watch if you want to go on vacation. You wear a gold watch if you're swimming. You wear a gold watch if you're playing tennis.
Yep.
Like,
Or you
Where
could be
go
like
watch?
Nadal and wear $1 million Richard Mille on your wrist
That's what you want.
while you playing tennis. Who doesn't want to wear $1 million watch while they play tennis?
Is there anyone else in your life that shares this passion with you of
Not
collecting watches?
neurotically, if that's the right word, as I do. It's actually funny. One of the reasons why I kind of started a little blog, just to talk about watches, kind of from a woman's perspective.
Oh, you do?
specifically.
Oh, you have a blog?
I do. It's just started. It's like a little baby blog.
That's
it's
cool.
not- It's not little, it's a big blog. Nothing's little. Big. We going big.
But I started it because I felt like I was annoying the closest people in my life, talking about all the things I've ever learned. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just found this out. That's so cool. About
Yeah.
Whatever watch. And, you know, as much as the people in my life, you know, my boyfriend, he also is very much into watches as well. But again, not nearly, again, as neurotically as I am. And
Sure.
It's kind of like, okay, cool. Like, as I kind of really get into the nitty gritty. And I'm just like, I'm just going to put my thoughts on a blog, and that's my way of getting it out. And people seem to appreciate it, which is good.
That's one of the cool things about this community is that people gravitate and find themselves together. Like they attract one another.
Yes.
I mean, that's how this whole thing started.
Yeah.
Right? It started like our friendship is built off of this stuff, and
Yeah.
now we're able to shoot these podcast episodes and share moments with people like yourself where we get to sort of let that out and express our passion and enthusiasm for this thing.
Yeah.
You had a point you were going to make?
Well, I was also thinking just from the episode where you guys had Nick on and Rashawn, one of your points where, you know, it's, you know, you're buying what you like, and on top of that, like, you know, it's almost like an expression of yourself, watches.
Oh,
right?
100%.
And specifically the question that I was thinking about coming to, you know, into this episode was when you guys asked Nick, like, what is it, you know, what does being a watch collector kind of mean to you? And to me, it's always been like, you know, people who are watch collectors are very particular people in that they treasure moments in their life, small or big. Like you
That's
ask,
a good point.
Yeah, you ask them about, you know, there's always a story behind one of their watches, right?
Yeah.
And it's very typically tied to like a moment in their life or, you know, something that happened. And I think for me, that's why watches are such an important part of expressing myself, right? Because through the watches that I have and through kind of how, you know, I think about watches and what I like, what I dislike, you can get a pretty clear picture of who that person is, right? Like
Yeah.
even Rashawn, you know, you're telling me this wonderful story, you know, that this moment that you very much remember.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm sure that's not the only watch where you have memories from, right?
Absolutely.
And so to me, that's why I feel like watches is just so special to me, and just being a watch collector just like means really like it's I'm collecting moments in my life. And
You
other
are,
people's
yeah,
lives.
yeah. And the cool thing is too, like to your point, in talking about Rashawn's story with this piece, is that story that happened when you had this piece was after you acquired the watch.
Yes.
And I think that's a thing too, right? Like a factor that a lot of people don't talk about as much, that we could talk about a little bit more, is how like they continue to make moments,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
So it's just like now it's like you had that moment with Jerry, and then you had another moment with Ben, where he helped you pick out a strap and like take it to a whole nother level.
Yes.
And so it's a continual thing
Yep.
that drives and pushes you and brings you closer to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredible. You had a question?
No, what I was gonna say was, speaking of like periods and times, and you guys know me very well, there's gonna be a point in time for most of the watches that I've collected. I've probably acquired them at about 5 a.m. in the morning. So that's how like inside
Random
joke.
eBay searches.
Yeah.
So
At 5
I
a.m.
make bad decisions at 5 in the morning.
I think everyone probably does. If you,
Well, I won't say bad
if
decisions.
you're not on your way somewhere and you're just up,
Like, it's not so much as like bad decisions, but it's like I will make an impulsive decision. I will buy a watch at 5 in the morning.
that's the beauty about cell phones and
Yes.
being computers.
And I'll be like, Perry, look at this watch I just brought. And I'll be like, look at the timestamp. 5 a.m.
It's actually funny that you mentioned that because one of the watches on that table right now, I acquired at like 3 a.m. in the morning.
So, so which watch is
Yo,
that?
but that-
Let's get into that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
What is the
Yes,
3
let's
a.m.
get
watch?
into that when
is?
it's a perfect segue. Please
All right.
share it.
So that Tom and Jerry watch.
You know what? I had a feeling.
Yeah.
I had a
So-
feeling.
All right, story behind that. Another piece of information about myself that you can get from that watch. I love Tom and Jerry. Grew
Okay.
up watching Tom and Jerry. I'm a big fan. And it's a very fun piece. It's actually a Seiko watch. It was
beautiful.
made for the Japanese market.
Mm-hmm.
And I told you about this, but I bought it off of an Instagram auction.
Oh, wow.
I did, yes. Like I actually put a bid through Instagram comments to
How
buy
high
that.
well, you won, so how high
You
did
know-
you
I
go?
didn't get too far.
You know, shockingly, not as much as I thought it was
Sure.
going to be. That was also under 200, actually.
Wow, nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this thing has
Manual line
brigade
for the
numerals on it.
70s.
As-
It has
yeah,
Tom and Jerry
yeah.
on the dial with brigade numerals.
Yeah.
Juxtaposition,
There we
Yeah.
go.
you know?
But also like to you know, to your point, like that is such a special piece, and you say you had it for under 200.
Yes.
And the deal is like people believe that you have to spend these astronomical amounts of money on watches to be accepted in the watch community or to even be considered a watch collector. And you know, we've shared, you know, people have asked me, you know, what do you think about like a Michael Kors watch? What do you think about a Bulova? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Or like a watch that I acquired from Macy's or this and that. It's like, well, how did it make you feel? What do you think about it? Like, do you love it? Did you buy it because it was the first thing that caught your eye?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And if that's the case, then it's just as valid as if you brought a Rolex Daytona.
Yeah, I think the biggest point is like, do you enjoy it? Do you wear it? One of the things
100%.
I love, I actually do like, there's a difference between like sharing your watch and like flexing a watch. And I
Yes.
actually love when people share watches.
Yeah. So in terms of like how the time plays into this, the guys who run the auction on their Instagram account, they're based in Australia. So everything's run on Australian time, which, you know, obviously that's,
Explains the 3 a.m.
yeah, so that's not super conducive to me kind of tracking where I was. But, you know, on the note of auctions as well, because, I mean, you know, this is very different from like your Phillips or some of
Sure.
these auctions. But, you know, I kind of set like a limit for myself. I was like, you know what, I'm not going to bid past this amount. It's not meant to be if I don't get it. And so I had placed a bid at a concert to go to that night. So I went to the concert and, you know, it was 3 a.m. waiting for my Uber to show up. And I was like, let's check out and see where I'm at right now. Like, why not? And someone had bid above me, and I was like, you know, I'm like, just like, I'm not at my limit. I could place one more bid. I'm
Yeah.
like, sure, why not? Let's try it. It's closing in like 6 hours because it's 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Why not? So I placed the bid, and I woke up the next morning, and, you know, I got it.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So,
Do you remember how many bids there were?
you know, honestly, not a lot. There was
Yeah.
like 5. Although
Okay.
I don't know how many people would be, you know, open to bidding a watch.
But the
they've never
brigade
seen.
numerals,
How
like
much?
the
How
numerals.
much higher did you bid compared to the
My
previous
original bid?
No, the second bid that won it.
Like
Like how?
more.
Yeah, I figured you were
Yeah.
gonna say that.
Sometimes that's just all the difference. you
That's
need.
all. Yeah, exactly. But like the numerals, the second hand,
The second hand has Jerry hanging on
it,
from
it
Dead
has
Life
Jerry hanging
because
off
Tom's
of it. Like
chasing him with a fork.
Yeah.
is I mean
Yeah.
like
And Jerry
It's fun.
spins. He goes round and round, kind of
It's
like in the
fun.
cartoons.
Yes, absolutely. It has that sentiment.
Yeah.
It speaks your story.
Yeah.
That's your truth. That's who you are.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, you being like a Tom and Jerry fan is just like, you know, and that's the beauty about these things too, is that like they can take us back to someplace where we were, right?
Yeah.
It's just
Mhm.
like, so there's building memories, sharing memories, but it also like taking you back to a
Yeah.
time that you remember,
Yep.
your appreciation for Tom and Jerry as a kid.
Yep.
So
Even
cool.
now.
Even
too,
now,
honestly.
yeah.
Even now.
So
It's a
cool.
good cartoon.
It is.
So
Yeah.
cool.
That's tight.
Yeah.
All right, let's go into. I'm interested about this piece here. This is Bulova.
Oh yeah, that's also a fun story.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, pretty much all of the pieces except for one that I brought are all vintage because I happen to like vintage pieces, and
Yeah.
that's just where I find my style.
They're so interesting.
Yes, because you find things that aren't necessarily available now,
Mhm.
and you just find some hidden treasures sometimes, and I
Absolutely.
feel like that was one of them. So I don't know if any of you guys have watched Queen's Gambit.
Yes,
I haven't.
I
Yeah.
have. I love that. I love that show.
It was great. It was very well done. But the main character,
Beth Harmon?
Yes, Beth Harmon. I was like, what is her
Okay.
name again?
Of course I know.
Of
course I know.
Being the amazing woman that she is, kind of taking on all these, chess players in, a very interesting time in the world, where women, weren't playing chess at that time. Like it was weird. It was kind of like, what are you doing? There's this one scene, and you know the scene I'm talking about.
Yes.
Where her mom gives her a vintage Bulova. It was a Miss America. I don't know which. I'm not sure which iteration of it was, but it was a Miss America, kind of like a ladies' cocktail watch like this. In the movie, and it kind of comes in at a pivotal time where she's really, taking her chess career, like really putting herself on the map and becoming like a real, threat, if you will. And so I saw that movie and I was like, I gotta find that watch. I just was like, I have to do it.
Living vicariously through.
We got to point out the size of that watch.
I don't even know what size. It's so small.
It's
It's
like
like the
10
size of my
millimeters.
thumb. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
And it's still a manually wound
it's
movement
a
inside of
manual line
Wow.
movement. So this watch is not the one that she had in the movie because I thought it was cooler than the one that she had in the movie. But it's a 1940s Bulova ladies cocktail watch. Out of all the watches that I have here, that's really the only one that's like categorized formally as like a ladies watch. And it has a really cool champagne dial. It's gold plated.
Yeah, the dial is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. And for something that, from the 1940s, I was shocked to find
Yeah.
it in that
Yep.
condition.
It has blue hands too, which
Yeah.
is good.
Yeah, found it off of Etsy.
There you go.
Yeah. You can find some good pieces on Etsy.
Yeah.
Rashawn knows from his 5 a.m.
Yeah.
My 5 a.m. Watch decisions. I won't say bad. Watch decisions.
There we go.
This was not a 5 a.m. purchase.
Okay.
I think it was a midday purchase.
Okay.
So you were a little bit drunk at lunchtime when you bought it.
No, I was at work, but I was kind of taking a break,
Mhm.
if you will. But, it was on my mind, and the guy who has the Etsy shop, he himself is a watchmaker. It's a hobby of his, and he, has a collection of watches himself from, I believe, his family members, and he also, finds watches and restores them. And so I saw that on his page, and I was like, it's not the watch that's in Queen's Gambit, but it's amazing.
Yeah.
And,
You how you're describing the gentleman you purchased this from, I find really interesting. And here's why. Oftentimes people advise people who are purchasing watches not to buy vintage online,
yes.
right? I'm sure you've heard this.
Oh, yes.
You can do it.
Yes.
The difference is when you explained buying this from the gentleman overseas, you spoke to him.
Yes, I actually, out of all the watches on that table, the only two I've seen in person prior to, actually, I don't think I've ever seen any of them prior to me actually purchasing them.
Wow.
But the
No,
the
yeah.
point that I'm trying to make too is like also with this person that you purchased this, You spoke to them.
Yes.
And I think that's the difference between like buying vintage watches online
Yes.
and like buying like toilet paper on Amazon. You can just hit buy
Yes.
on the toilet paper,
I
right?
can.
Yes.
But if you're gonna spend good money
Yes.
on a good watch online,
Mm-hmm.
reach out to the person that's selling it.
Yeah.
Ask them questions,
Yep.
Yeah.
right? Maybe you can get to know a little bit about them,
Yep.
right? And not only will it give you a little bit more reassurance about the purchase that you're going to make, you're also building a connection, right? This is someone that you can then use as a resource should you have any issues with your vintage watch. You know that the person that you're dealing with on the other side is more than likely a reputable person who wants you to come back and be a return customer.
Exactly.
Right, and I think that's the key that like a lot of people miss when they talk about buying vintage watches online. You can, it can still be relationship based, right?
Yes.
And I think that's the key, and that's how you
Yeah.
got this. This thing is beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like even, because you're buying something online, going off of pictures, let's be real, no picture ever does, the watch justice online, especially for vintage pieces. You really, it's almost, I feel like, more of an opportunity to build a relationship than
Yep.
you would normally because you kind of have to reach out.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you don't have to, but I probably wouldn't do that.
Exactly. Exactly.
I would highly not recommend that. But even so, it kind of again builds a story behind acquiring the piece, and you get to know other collectors that way, like other people who share that.
Yeah, I mean, we
same
always
hobby.
talk about the power of relationships, and that's what you did when you bought that.
Yeah.
Yes.
You didn't just buy it online. You spoke to the person who was selling it,
Yeah.
and you build a rapport and a trust.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
you feel safe actually buying something from them sight unseen.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's because I buy vintage watches.
Yeah.
Always have. I mean, this is a vintage piece. I just got one a month ago for Christmas. But that's what I do when I'm searching for vintage. When I do a lot of scouring, and then at some point when I feel like I'm ready to pull the trigger, I pause, I stop myself, and I shoot an email or pick up the phone.
Yep.
And I want to talk to the other person on the side and just ask them questions.
Yep.
And it's always a pleasant experience because again, it's the community.
Yeah.
You're talking to someone who's they're selling this watch. Chances are they're selling it because they know it's worth selling.
Yes.
In terms of like this is a good deal. This is a great piece. They want it to go to someone who's going to cherish it.
Yep.
Right. And so that in itself brings you together, and it's again it's a really incredible experience.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, especially like with, I feel like also with vintage pieces, one of the reasons why I personally just find acquiring them much more satisfying, I guess is the right word, is because there's a hunt.
Yeah.
You really
Oh,
gotta like
100%.
gotta do your research, and in your research process, you're learning about the watch.
Yep.
You need
Yeah.
to understand like, for example, that Tom and Jerry watch, I was like, okay, it was made in the 70s by Seiko, it was, made for the Japanese market specifically. Like,
Yep.
you got to learn about the watch so you can know what to look out for online if hopefully there's no red flag.
Sure.
But, unfortunately,
Yeah.
that stuff's out there.
It kind of forces you to study.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love that. Like, one of my favorite things is just being able to learn about things. And then especially in watches, like you never stop learning. There's
Yeah.
always
You can never
something
know
new.
enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next we have this is so I call this the Starbucks because I think it's pretty obvious.
Yes. Yes.
But
yes.
people call it the
Cermit.
The Cermit. What is
Ceramic Kermit.
But why?
I don't
Because
know
there
how I
was
feel about that.
There was
a watch that people nicknamed the Kermit,
Kermit.
and it started off as an anniversary piece for the Submariner.
Yeah.
So it was a green aluminum bezel and a steel case with a black dial.
Yeah.
So this is now the ceramic bezeled version of that. So they switched the K for a C and called it a Cermit instead.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
I'd rather call it a Cermit than Starbucks. It also makes sense.
Yeah. It does make sense to call it a Cermit.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks just like the
It looks
Kermit.
like the Starbucks logo.
It doesn't. Starbucks logo doesn't have black in it. It's all white. It's white and green.
It used to,
It used to,
Yes.
yeah.
didn't it?
I think so. It's
I have to
mostly
go back
white.
It's probably
It's
on
mostly
some of
white
those
and
special
green.
cups.
Yeah.
A holiday cup.
Either way, this is a beautiful. This is a beautiful watch.
Yes.
Also happens to be a piece that is pretty hot right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, you know, how did this happen?
Yeah.
What's the story with this?
Yeah, so that watch, I actually don't wear that very frequently. Again, just I prefer vintage
Okay.
watches. That piece actually belongs to my boyfriend. That was his, Rolex
Was his.
was his.
That means you took it.
Was his.
Keyword.
Is his.
Okay.
His. I've honestly only worn it twice since, I'm going to say we brought it back home because I actually brought it back
Okay.
home. So since he's had it, I've worn it really only twice and not recently at all. Because it was, for his kind of first watch purchase that he wanted, he wanted a Rolex, because Rolex is, I know there's a whole hype around Rolex
Sure.
and,
We talk about
it's-
hype a lot here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rashawn doesn't believe there is a Rolex hype. It's funny you say that.
Oh my God, we're coming back to this.
Ba-dum-bum.
Yep.
I think it's something bigger than hype. It's just something that we can't fathom.
Okay,
Sure,
you
let's
know
get into
what?
it.
Yeah,
Actually,
the outrageous level of hype.
Please.
I'm gonna offer. I'm not gonna say I fully agree with you, but I'm gonna offer an additional perspective here.
Okay, let's go.
I think, Rolex is to me overhyped amongst people who don't share the love and appreciation for watches that we do.
That's our position.
Yes.
Well, I'll speak for myself. That's my position.
No, I
So-
agree with that.
Okay.
I think it's overhyped because yes, Rolex as a brand name, again, incredibly well done in terms of brand recognition, right? They've really just solidified themselves.
Yeah, Hans Wilsdorf is a marketing genius.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
You can't deny
Yeah.
that significance. It's almost equivalent to De Beers and the whole diamonds
Yeah,
are forever
right.
thing, right? But I think even myself kind of going through the phases of really kind of finding myself, finding where I wanted to be kind of with watches and what I liked and didn't like, Rolex was the first brand I obviously heard of. And for a while, actually, the more I started to learn about watches in the community, I actually started to not like Rolex.
Okay.
For a
Can you-
period
I
of
think
time.
I think
Can you
I've had
elaborate on
similar
that?
feelings.
Yes. So I didn't like it because I was just a Rolex is a Rolex. You have other brands, like Patek, AP, Omega that make objectively, in my opinion, better and better looking watches. And so I was kind of why is everyone going for Rolex? Maybe that shouldn't be my first watch, and I don't need to kind of take it that seriously because and also there was a little bit of that I don't want to say kind of a negative, I didn't want to be associated with the
It's a
same group
stigma.
of people.
It's a
Yeah.
stigma.
It's a stigma.
Yeah, I didn't want to be associated with the people who are yeah, I want a Rolex just for a Rolex, and you ask them why, and they're because it's a Rolex, and I'm okay, so do you know anything about the history of
Nope.
if you ask half the people how a sub came to be, I'm pretty sure most people don't know.
It's true.
You know.
So that kind of turned me off a little bit, but coming back around that phase and where I'm sitting now is Rolex is Rolex for a reason. They have built a great brand, but they
Absolutely.
also do make very practical, watches that you can quite
And-
honestly just beat around.
And and that's why you love vintage.
Yes.
Yes.
But that's what I love about Rolex. I agree with you. There is a stigma,
Yes.
and it can kind of turn you off. But when you're wearing one, when you hold one, you kind of get it.
Especially the modern ones, I get it.
You get it. This is a beautiful watch, and it's executed flawlessly.
Yes.
I mean, the finishing on this is incredible. The bezel is, just looking at the bezel and how it plays with light, it's really nice.
Yes.
I get it.
Yes.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
But that stigma kind of ruins it. My where I'm at now with it, I'm taking a position where I'm refusing to let it bother me. I'm not thinking about the people. I'm enjoying the company of the people that I know
Yep.
appreciate Rolex, and we can fan out over this all we want.
Yes.
But I will agree with you in the shared appreciation we have for vintage. I think when it comes to Rolex, I think vintage is where it's at.
Exactly.
You know, I
Exactly.
think though the finishing on this is incredible and this is a beautiful watch, what's great about vintage is that you can tell when a Rolex has lived a life.
Yes.
And so I imagine that as you wear this, as your boyfriend wears this, and as it's purposed, in 10, 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
this thing's going to look even cooler.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see the day where all the modern Rolexes that are out now,
Yep.
after they've been beat up and purposed.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can't wait to see what they look like.
Oh yeah. I mean, even if you look at the original Kermits, you know, with the aluminum bezels, those bezels are starting to patina,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they look
They look
gorgeous.
And there's a
Gorgeous.
bunch
We
of different
prefer- yeah.
variations of
Yeah,
it too.
gorgeous.
Really?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
bezels with like kissing 40s and like
It's
there's
absolutely-
dials
yeah.
and
Yeah.
like open 6s and 9s. It's crazy.
They've turned into like a lime green with like a hint of yellow. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's so cool. And it's so funny because me and Ben had this conversation earlier today. I said, I don't know if I want a Rolex. And he said, that's because you want all of them.
Yeah, it's true. But with the
And
caveat,
I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like, if I can't have all of them, then I want none of them.
the caveat with that too is that it's like, let's be honest, most modern Rolexes look the exact same.
Yes.
The Submariner a regular Submariner looks like a black bezel GMT,
Yeah.
and then that black bezel GMT looks like a Batman.
Oh, they
It's like,
listen.
they're
The people
all
that
look
come,
the same.
people that come in those jewelers, they go ahead and say, "Is that a Submariner?" And you're like,
I've
"No."
literally heard
Submarina.
I've literally
I love
heard
that.
people call a GMT a sub. And I've been like, what are you
We've
doing?
seen it. We've
Yeah,
seen it.
all the time. And the cool thing about vintage is that they stand out.
Yes.
Partly because
They
they
do.
patinaed, but also they were so dramatically different.
Yeah, they
Yes.
were.
Yes. Yes. A lot of those Rolexes, and you know, to your point, Perry, I think the reason why you love the Explorer 2 so much is that it hasn't changed since its inception.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing that has
The
changed
size.
is maybe the size
size
and
and the
GMT
and the
hand.
GMT hand.
Yeah.
That's it.
Outside of that, it's still steel,
It's
steel bezel.
It's perfect.
The whole nine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, you
and
know,
it to me it just screams like use me, beat me up, abuse me.
of course.
And I love that about that watch, and especially because when we talk about juxtaposition today, when you think about Rolex, you don't think tool watch so much.
it's so everybody wants to treat
Yeah.
it so preciously.
It's so precious, and I think the Explorer 2 appeals to me because I really wouldn't feel bad about giving that thing a good run for its
Yeah,
money.
I don't think
Yeah.
that anything looks luxurious about an Explorer 2.
Exactly.
Which is why we like it.
Yeah.
Because it's a watch that you don't feel bad about using it how you're supposed to use it.
and you don't find them on many people's wrists.
No.
which is why I like it even more.
You said it. You said when everybody goes left, I like to
Yeah,
go
a
right.
little bit.
No, I mean, I get it. It's you know, especially like with the GMTs, everybody wants a Pepsi, and I was like, no,
Yeah.
no, I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah, get a Coke.
Yeah.
Coke bezels.
Coke bezel is where it's at. But I'm not gonna lie. I was like, man, that Pepsi's kind of hot.
I only
listen.
feel like that when the bezels fade.
Yeah.
Well, no.
When the yeah.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
And again, going back to what you were saying, me personally, I speak for myself, I kind of stay away from it because it's like everybody's on top of it.
Yeah.
But red and blue, black goes to, I mean, it's
classic.
great.
It's
Yeah.
great.
It is what it is. It is great.
Especially the ceramic. It is
Yeah,
great.
It's great. I'm not gonna steal any
Jubilee,
of its thunder.
great.
If
sure.
you have a Pepsi GMT, it probably looks great on your wrist.
Yes.
It'd be hard for it not to. It's a pretty watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even I feel like just not even, you know, GMTs in general or the Pepsi, but just all Rolexes in general. I think one thing that Rolex does very well is you can pretty much put that watch on almost anyone's wrist and it'll just somehow look good.
Yeah.
It'll change you. It'll change you into a whole nother man. You just like morph into like
Oh my God.
Powerful. You feel powerful when you put your Rolex on?
yeah, like you got bit by a radioactive spider. And
Oh my God.
there you
Don't
go,
do that.
red and blue.
Don't do that.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, man, it's legit.
So we got one more
Yes.
on the table. This happens to be another brand that I love very much. I sometimes feel like these guys think I love them a little too much because I've heard, I'm not gonna I'm not going to point fingers, but I've heard the expression. It's very elderly. It's a very elderly brand. I'm not going to say any names though. But you got an IWC.
Yes,
I love IWC.
I do as well.
Yeah, and I like their modern ones too.
Yes, I personally like their vintage. I mean, there's a thread here, but like I personally like their vintage ones more. Again, just because their vintage pieces tend to be, not all of them, because you know they do have some of their military issued watches, but most of them tend to be a little bit on the dressy side.
Yeah.
And I don't know, something about that just fully written out logo gets me.
I agree with you.
International watch company is
I was
awesome.
poking fun at saying like it's an elderly brand, but there is something about it that is incredibly mature,
Yes.
that I do enjoy because I think that they do it really well.
Yes.
And vintage IWCs are really cool, and that is one of the things that I enjoy about them is that they've written out the entire name.
Yes.
It's not just IWC; it's like International
Yep.
Watch Company, which is such a powerful statement.
Yeah.
Especially when you think back to the time when they were in like their heyday.
Yeah.
It's like no, international
Yeah.
Yeah.
watch company.
Well,
we're not just domestic, baby.
They kept everybody. They kept everybody alive.
But
Yeah.
what was crazy too is that IWC is the only watch brand, Swiss-made watch brand, started by an American.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for IWC and their history, we wouldn't have watches how we have them today. Because IWC is the brand that scaled watchmaking.
Yeah.
American guy brought the assembly line to watchmaking. That wasn't a thing before.
Yeah.
So it's streamlined. That Rolex wouldn't make 1 million watches a year if it wasn't for IWC.
100%.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
And the lugs on this are crazy.
They're
Yeah.
really
That's
nice.
the best part.
Also, too, didn't they power their factories with what's the
Water.
With water?
Yeah.
What's the like the little? It's not windmills, but
No,
it's like
a water wheel.
water wheel.
Yeah.
Yes, they were like one of the first to actually
Getting
do like a
electricity straight
non.
from the river.
They did like a non-carbon factory.
They were green before it was cool.
They were
Yeah.
green before it was cool.
Wow.
So shout out to IWC.
Yeah.
So how did you acquire this piece?
Thank you, Ben.
Okay.
So,
It's a little something to do with it.
yeah, I mean, everything I feel like that's
And you
here
got the
today
original
has
buckle.
Ben's touch on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
You still
great.
haven't let me change the strap on that, so
You got to bend it
I
out.
haven't touched it yet.
Okay, we're gonna bend that out then.
Yeah.
So this watch also, technically, actually, yes, it does belong to my boyfriend. However, that was a gift from me for our 5-year anniversary.
Oh,
beautiful.
nice.
So he mentioned to me, you know, he was also thinking either of getting a Rolex or an IWC. Those were kind of his 2 picks for his like first watch, if you will.
Okay.
And he casually mentioned to me, this was, I don't know how many years ago at this point, but he was like, I really like the old watches that have International Watch Company written out on it. And so I remembered that. And, you know, when it came for our 5-year anniversary, I was like, you know, I really want to do something nice. And I was like, oh, I remember that he really liked the vintage IWCs.
Yeah.
So I tracked one down. I specifically went for gold because I knew he wouldn't get himself a gold watch. He's, you know, he's like unsure of how to wear a gold watch, and I think that's because nowadays everything is steel.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good
And,
point.
Yeah, like, you know, even some of some other people that I talk to who are interested in watches, especially if they're a guy, they're very hesitant to wear gold, and I don't know.
I don't
why.
get it.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Gold watches purpose for everything.
The thing I hear is that it's flashy, but I don't think so. You know, I mean,
I think it's almost counter signaling to wear a gold watch nowadays. Because people get so crazy, especially with Rolex, right? Because
Yeah.
people get so crazy about the steel watches and they know what they go for on the secondary market, that it's almost like if you're wearing a steel Rolex anywhere, people want to ask you how you got that.
Yeah.
They're like, what'd you do to get that? How much did you pay for it? Did you pay, you know, let's
Yeah.
use a Daytona for an example. Those things are trading for 40 grand right now, but they only retail for 14. So people think you either got money like that or you still spent a bunch of money at an AD or did something silly and had an AD package it or something like that. But when you go for gold, it's like no one really talks about it unless they know.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. But there's been songs and even like pop culture or just any kind of influence. It's always been a gold watch. Like no one's going ahead and
Yeah, I
spitting,
mean,
like,
gold's the ultimate
about like
status symbol.
you know like a steel watch. Like everyone's like my gold. Even if somebody say like a gold Daytona, like I'm
Yeah.
going gold.
There's no songs called Still Daytona.
No. It's there are songs out there called Gold Watch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's no such thing as like steel watch. It's like
Yeah.
gold watch, gold chain, so and so.
Well,
Because gold
yeah.
makes people feel powerful and important.
Listen,
It's
it
not
goes,
going to be white gold. It's not going to be platinum. It looks like steel. So what are you getting?
but hold on,
Yellow
it
or
goes
rose
back
gold?
to ancient civilization. And P, you know, we're always on that.
We're on something.
Yes. It always goes back to Egypt. And we talked about it even when you brought up how Egypt was the first
With the
civilization
clepsydras?
to
Oh, with the
measure
clepsydra.
time. So it's like all of these callbacks is always to the beginning of civilization. You know what I mean?
And also,
Well,
gold is
yeah.
currency.
It was, and it was always a precious metal, and today it's even used in computers.
Yeah.
I think I understand his argument that it's a little flashy. I mean, I feel that way about gold watches sometimes, is particularly when it's on a bracelet.
Yes.
I think what's great about IWC, again, is that everything is incredibly tasteful. It has a very mature personality to it, but there's also like a refinedness and a sophistication to how they laid everything out
Yep.
that I think is not flashy at all,
Yep.
even though it's like a legit gold watch. And one of our favorite things, like what I would do with this, like this would be obviously like one of my go-to dress watches, but
Yep.
I wouldn't be afraid to wear this with jeans and a t-shirt either.
Yeah.
Like I think that is just really cool.
Keep trying to tell him that. Yeah.
Maybe he'll be convinced now.
Yeah. You just got to own it. You just got to own
Yeah.
it.
It's a, but yeah,
It becomes you after you're comfortable with it.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, definitely.
You know, even for me, I like, you know, I wear 34 millimeter watches. Like, it wasn't a, you know, a easy pill to swallow at first because everybody's like, why are you wearing that small watch? So and so. But then you go ahead and you're like, nah, but this is me.
Yeah.
And, but then when you
They don't
actually
know any
wear
better.
it, it's like you see it and it looks good.
Yes.
This one I think is a little bigger though. This is like it feels like a 36, 37.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like 37.
It
Right?
wears like honestly closer to like a 38, 39.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's because of the lugs.
Mm-hmm.
They
it's a lot
wrap
of
around
lug.
the ends of your wrist.
It's a lot of lug.
This thing is gorgeous.
Yeah. I slip it on. From
Beautiful,
time to time.
like perfect, like round shape.
Yeah.
It looks great. Like
It's just
it's a
classic.
callback, yeah, to like
Yeah.
a traditional pocket watch.
Yep.
That's exactly
Yeah,
what it is.
yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Exactly what it is.
That's a great point. I think it's awesome that you guys like are able to sort of share this hobby of yours that's grown into a passion with one another.
Yeah.
I'm kind of going through that right now with my wife because she's now getting into watches and it's a lot of fun. So kudos to you. This is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I might need you to help me find IWC.
I got you. Just name your price and caliber.
Oh man.
We specifically were looking for a caliber 89 too for the
Yeah.
movement.
Also, I will have to say, one of the things about gold watches, particularly gold vintage watches, so underrated.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
underrated and therefore undervalued.
Yeah.
What year is this?
You can find a gold watch
What
for
year
a
is this?
decent price right now.
1960s?
60s, right?
Yeah.
You told me? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
60s is the best circa right now.
I think so. I agree with that. 100% for
Oh, yeah.
vintage.
You know,
Absolutely.
you know, it's funny too. In my collection, I just started to acquire pieces from the 80s.
Yeah.
So I went like 60s, 70s, no 80s, 90s, late 2000s, and then modern watches.
Hmm.
I had nothing in between the 80s, which is so funny.
I don't think I have anything from the 80s.
80s, but you know what I think? 80s is a design that kind of got lost between the 70s and 90s. Because it was very experimental, because you got to think about it, like what was going on between quartz watches, digital watches,
Yeah.
and everything else. Like you kind of like lose the analog watch.
That's a good point. I think that's when like people like digital watches start becoming like a big thing.
Exactly.
And then also there seems to be like when I think about, I mean I really wasn't running around in the 80s, but when I think about like the 90s is at some point it just people stopped kind of wearing watches.
People stop wearing watches. Yeah, but that is true.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true.
Well, you've got an amazing collection.
Thank you.
Appreciate you stopping by and sharing it with us.
Thank you for having me.
And what's really, really good about it, though, and again, it goes back to my appreciation for vintage. It's eclectic. Nothing here is really the same at all.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of character, there's a lot of fun, there's a lot of personality, and I think that's what's really cool about it, is because through watches you're expressing yourself, and so you can express different facets of who you are.
Yep. For
Right?
sure.
Because we're not all completely like the same
Yep.
in and of ourselves.
Yep.
We have different aspects of our character.
Yep.
And you get to have a little bit of fun with that and wake up, and however you feel, that's where you
Yep.
find yourself.
Exactly.
And if you feel like being connected to your grandfather, you have this thing here,
Yep.
which is incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. I still see the photos from like the final few years of his life, and he's wearing it. It's not
That's
a strap,
awesome.
but he's wearing it like in almost every photo.
That's
Beautiful.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, and now you have it, and you can pass it down someday.
Yes. My mom is actually funny. Last year, my mom was like, I actually thought about it. I haven't worn this watch at all, and I was like, well, you're about a couple years too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's mine now, Mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah,
This was a
thank
lot of
you.
fun. I hope you
Yes.
had fun.
Yes.
This is amazing.
Do you guys have anything else?
No, I think we're good.
We're good.
We showed
Uh,
off a lot.
Say it again.
We showed off a lot.
We did, yeah. And we'll have to have you back on when you get the salmon dial
Yes. In July.
micro rotor,
In July.
because you'll have it before this guy. So
Yup.
Maybe
I'm
we
gonna
can
just
test it
take
out and
hers and
see
be
how
like,
it-
"Here's
how it
look
looks
what
with
I
the
she's gonna
salmon
got."
flex it in the wrist check.
that'd be
Well,
good.
she can post it on Instagram, and then I'll bring the watch here.
Yeah.
There you go.
Respect.
There you go.
Nice.
Proof that Dana got it.
Well, that wraps episode 13.
Yes.
Man, we're climbing up there. Before you know it, we'll be at 20. But please, we appreciate you all watching. You know where to find us. You can find us on Instagram at RiskCheckPod, RiskCheck Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and we're still expanding.
Maybe the metaverse.
Maybe the metaverse.
I had to throw that in there. I've been throwing that in there since episode 12.
I mean, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Maybe in the metaverse. We
Yeah.
might be sitting in your
In your living room. It's possible. We'll figure it out. But appreciate you all. And again, I can't stress this enough. Comment, like, share, subscribe. You can talk to us. We're approachable. We want to know what you think
Yes.
about the podcast. We want to know what you want to see, what you like, what you dislike. We literally had a supporter of the podcast fly up to New York to spend some time with us today, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
So reach out to us and let us know. Peace.
Peace.